Hello, welcome to Interface. We have with us today Professor Ashish Nandi, one of India's foremost social theorists and cultural and political critics. Professor Nandi has made crucial interventions on a number of issues of contemporary relevance, including the rise of nationalism, identity politics, mass violence, communalism, and the dialogue and interface of cultures. He was director and fellow of Center for Developing Societies at New Delhi. He won the Fukuoka Asian Cultural Prize in 2007, and he was among the list of top 100 public intellectuals published by the Carnegie Foundation in 2008. Welcome to Interface, Professor Ashish Nandi. We would like to know some of the things which you have accepted as your chief concerns during the last several decades. One of your chief concerns has been the interface and dialogue between cultures, and you have tended to look at cultures as distinct identities. So, could you say something by way of introduction to this particular issue, as cultures as distinct identities?
I have been particularly interested in protecting the cultures of communities, groups, and settlements which are facing major or massive attacks on their culture, the small cultures of the world. Within every large society, there is the kind of major cultural pattern, but within them there are smaller cultures with their own distinctive languages, which we usually call dialects, distinctive customs and practices, distinctive musical systems, distinctive mythologies, distinctive epics, and distinctive ways of life. And these are under attack today in the world, where there is a homogenizing thrust of a global culture, a global middle class culture. And it has been my effort to find out whether through dialogue we can make people more aware of this cultural distinctiveness of small groups and make them aware that these should be protected, because the death of a culture is a death of a part of us in any case. It is not the death of only the people who are living in that culture. It is not only the death of a way of life of another person. It is death of a part of our life, closing of one possible option, one experiment in lifestyle and living, which we have lost.
So, especially when we talk about the counterpoising of the West and the non-West, this has been one of your very important themes throughout your writing in the post-colonial context. So, I was thinking of this particular counterpoising. For example, what is West today, what is known as the West today, was once upon a time colonized by the East. So, what is West has several elements of what we generally know as the East. Even the religion, for instance, if you take Christianity, for instance, it is basically an Eastern religion, which happened to colonize Europe and which became the dominant religion for a long time. So, this is what I was thinking about.
But that was not really colonization. Colonization was a different kettle of fish. Colonization always include an element of forced domination, a domination which there is an element of force. People have gone and settled in many parts of the world without crisis, without conflict. But people have settled in other parts of the world, taking an enormous toll of human life and cultures. For example, 3 continents were colonized by whites. Over 300 years, North America, South America and Australia became predominantly white continents. That I call colonization. The fact that Europeans came and ruled over countries as large as India is an instance of colonialism. This is and there the clash of cultures takes a different form. It is true that West has learned many things from India and Asia for that matter. All the three major religions of the West are all from Asia. But it is also true that they have configured it according to their principles. Gandhi once said Christianity was a good religion before it went to the West. He had in mind this part of the story, that they made something out of Christianity which became quite domineering, with a sense of built-in superiority to all other faiths, which actually disregarded the claim of other religions to even call themselves religions. That is the part I am pointing out. That is what I would call a principle of dominance, where even when they are taking something from outside, that is configured within their own culture in a rather exclusive fashion. For example, I can also give you the example of Greece. Ancient Greece was more in touch with West Asia and South Asia than with West Europe. For 300 years, Plato and Aristotle were proscribed readings in the West, because the church did not allow that. If you wanted to study Plato or Aristotle, you had to come to West Asia and study it in Arabic. So, I am quite aware that the principles of cultural exchange can take very strange forms, but I am more concerned with the fact that where categories are exported to another culture and that they are pushed so hard that they become a way in which the people in the culture begin to judge their own selves. Like for example, the status that English enjoys in India, that is, I think, not normal. I have no objection to English. I write in English myself, but I grudge the fact that writing in English has become more prestigious than writing in Malayalam or in Bengali. And that I think is a tragedy, because there is so much of talent which will never find expression in English. Everything will then depend on who translates, how, when. That I think is a rather sad instance.
This quite related to this context is the notion that European modernity itself is not originally European, that they have taken over this from the Arabs, medieval Arabs. A case of what one can call mistaken identity, what we call European modernity. So, would you think this adds to our understanding of
personally, I am not a great enthusiast of the modern civilization. I like to look beyond modernity, because I see a certain tiredness already in modern civilization, and it has been also steeped itself in so much of violence and so much of this kind of a contractual, impersonal relationships, and so much into how should I put it, so much into the business of delegitimizing other cultures, other forms of civilization, that I have lost my faith in modern civilization. I have learned from Gandhi and Tagore to look very skeptically and very critically at modern civilization. It is the dominant civilization in the world, and began to look beyond it, because I noticed that tiredness in modern civilization, that I think people are looking for alternatives. I think after the 20th century, when we killed something like 22 crores of people in organized violence, we at least should grant that modern civilization has a core of violence which has been unmatched in history. The savages, or at least what the moderns call savages, the savages have never been as violent and as bloodthirsty as the moderns have been. And I have therefore begun to look for these alternatives in the plurality of cultures, in the alternative that various cultures offer, in the kind of effort many cultures have made to keep certain kinds of values in human relationships, and in a certain attempts to contain violence or minimize it. I have begun to look for these signs, how they do it, whether they succeed in doing it, or whether this kind of answers will satisfy the contemporary world or not, or meet our needs, in other words.
Could you be more specific about what you call alternatives?
For instance, I think our hope that the urban industrial civilization will be a more human society, I think has been disproved very decisively by the 20th century. For instance, to give you some example, on the whole we have killed, as I have told, something like 22 crores of people in organized mass violence. Nearly at least 60%, if not 75% of the people have been killed by secular societies. So, the idea that secularism can liberate you from religious violence, caste violence, ethnic violence, or linguistic violence has been disproved by this century. In fact, out of these 22 crores, less than 1 crore has been killed in the 20th century in religious violence. Yet, we all the while talk about religious violence as if it is the major violence. So, our perspective is determined by earlier centuries. In earlier centuries, religious violence was very important, but that does not mean that it is important now. In our times, it is a different kind of violence we are seeing. I mean, this nuclear bombing of Japan killed a lakh of people in Hiroshima and another lakh in Nagasaki, but people forget that when they bombed Tokyo city, they killed 1,20,000 people in one day. So, this kind of mass annihilation shows that amongst the killers and those who are being attacked, the distance has increased. Before bombing it from the plane from 40,000 feet or 35,000 feet, you do not see the face of your victim, you do not see the blood, you don't see the suffering of children. It's a statistics. Violence becomes a statistics, and that is the kind of violence in which 20th century specialized, and that is the kind of violence which modern civilization endorses. And I would like to look beyond it. I would like to look for an ideology, a worldview where containment of violence and rejection of war is made a fundamental canon of civilization. You cannot say we fight for civilization, we let us have a war to end all wars. On the other hand, you say let there be no war. If you are, and modern civilization has not been able to do that.
Do we have concrete socio-political models?
Plenty. I mean, times have changed. We not only had Gandhi in the 20th century, now the most interesting people in the world, the greatest Gandhians may not have even read Gandhi today. None of them is in India, none of them is Hindu. I think Nelson Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma, the Dalai Lama, they are in some sense the greatest Gandhians today. They have made non-violence a central plank of our world. I mean, look at the success which Martin Luther King achieved. So, there is this part of the story that a different way of dealing with human conflicts is emerging, and people are afraid of it.
So we were talking about an end to violence.
Yes.
So one of the things which plagues India today is communal violence, and sometimes on a very large scale. So do we have something inherent in our civilization which can be drawn upon, from which we can draw sustenance to combat communalism?
It is not an accident that in the last 60 years after independence, last years, of all the people killed in communal violence, only 3.5% have died in villages. Even though 3/4 of Indians live in villages, only 1/4 of Indians live in cities, but 96.5% of those killed in communal violence have died in cities. And to that extent, I would like to argue that to the extent villages are the lifeblood of this civilization, they are the predominant mode of living in this civilization, our civilization knows how to live together. People have lived together here for centuries. I have done this massive study of partition violence and of the survivors, and now I did it after 50 years after the event, so most of the people have died, but many survived. So we interviewed something like 1,500 people, and I was astounded to see then when we asked that, have you yourself received any help from the other side? I mean, if Hindus, we will ask them, have you received any help from any Muslim when you were attacked or when you were escaping? And if it's Muslim, we will ask that, have you received any help from any Hindus, if Muslims were being attacked by Hindus? 40% said that yes, they received help or they had heard of somebody getting help. That also is part of the civilization. If you go to the history of Germany, I don't think the figure will be even 1%. I mean, it was so rare. That is why you had to make a movie like Schindler's List. But here it was common. And I have a suspicion that communal riots, as you see it now, are entirely political shows. They are meant to advance your political cause, to show your street power, to discredit some government, or to create a situation of fear and anxiety in one community, so they will vote in a particular way. This is the way communal violence has come to India. This is the way it has been in Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is the way communal violence has taken place in Sri Lanka. This is the story. And it is, organization of communal violence has become a chartered accountant's game. You calculate the gains and you calculate the losses, and if there are more gains in inciting a communal riot, then you will there are specialists who will start a communal riot. It's as simple as that.
But then why are people incited if there is no inherent hatred? Why are people so quickly incited to violence?
These are media intensive times. You know, if you, it is true that people get swayed. I mean, I saw how the riots were created against the Sikhs during 1984 after Mrs. Gandhi died. And I saw how rumors were spread and how the riots were fomented. But the aim was then to arouse the fear in the Hindus that not only have the Sikhs killed Mrs. Gandhi, they are conspiring against the Hindus, they have poisoned your water taps and water, and they are out to take revenge for the Indian army action at the Golden Temple. And I was not really surprised that people were provoked, and even then people were not that provoked. So they had to import functionaries and fighters from outside of Delhi who will come and start the riot. That's the way it goes. And this is the story with every riot, that riots do not take place in a vacuum. and people are not as much provoked as they are made out to be. They are only provoked to the extent of condoning it once it has taken place, and the gundas let loose who are there in the first place for the loot, the advantage of getting the loot, they are there for that, and other people condone their act, think that they represent the Hindus or they represent the Muslims, and therefore they are protectors, so we should condemn their pillage or looting. That's the part of the story. That's the story in virtually every riot, I have said.
Yeah, but then we have to live with our cities. So our whatever
Not
impulses we
necessarily.
have.
Anybody with a little bit of determination and will can stop a riot within 4 hours if it is a mixed constituency, rural and urban, and within 6 hours if it is predominantly a rural constituency, because there the communication is a little more difficult and takes a little time. But maximum a riot can go on spontaneously is 6 hours. 6 hours, not more than that.
So you mean to say that apart from the divide that you have posited between the rural segments of the population and the urban, this particular sentiment, which is widespread in the rural areas, can also work in the cities. Is that what you mean?
No, on the contrary, in rural areas it is much more difficult to organize the riot. That is why only 3.5% of people died in rural areas, despite the fact that 3/4 of our...
Not because of the sentiment.
Not at all. Sentiments, they have a kind of, you can say there is sentiment involved in the sense that they have a robust common sense. They know each other as neighbors. So they are not influenced by your propaganda. I can think only of 2 major riots where the rural people were also affected, psychologically, truly affected. They were also, one partition riots and 2 Gujarat 2002 riots. Except these I cannot think of. And all other riots are mostly urban riots.
The one in Nelly in Assam.
Nelly, yes. But it was not really a rural riot. In Nelly, killings were rural, but that was because it was an impersonal settlement. They killed strangers. I am telling you that the stories we hear of neighbors betraying each other, that really doesn't take place easily in life, because they know each other as neighbors, there is some relationship, and they always try to protect their neighbors. Only in urban areas there is enough anonymity, enough distance, enough enough difference of language, enough contractual relationship. There is no that intimacy is missing, and there it is possible to kill each other as strangers. It is like 2 armies which do not know each other. So I am saying that it is in that context that riots, that is why riots take place more frequently in urban areas.
What you have called alternate sciences, especially in that book on 2 Indian scientists, Jagadish Chandra Bose, one of them. So you have also written about the need to subvert universalization of categories like democracy, secularism. So would you comment on how this can be done? How you can formulate an alternate, or as part of an alternate epistemology?
First of all, experience with life teaches you much more than textbooks can ever do. Ideas can come from textbooks, ideas can come from slums, and I have tried to give importance even to the ideas that come from slums, or which come from direct intervention in society, or direct intervention in cultural life, from artists, poets, writers on the one hand, and from practicing politicians and social workers and others on the other hand. What I am trying to suggest is this, that exactly as there can be criticism of political and social ideologies, exactly as there can be criticisms of the way you use or interpret a religious system or religion for that matter, there can be a criticism of knowledge systems too. Unfortunately, in our times, particularly in modern times, the status given to science and its version of rationality has been so enormous that you can do anything in the name of science. You can be the most cruel and most violent in the name of science and scientific rationality. And that's what people have done. People have Marx talked of scientific history, history unfolding like so many laws of nature. And it seemed to many followers of Marx, therefore, that if for that you need to kill a few millions, doesn't matter. Revolution will come and make this world perfect. We know it has not happened. Lot of killings have been done in the name of science. A lot of killings have been done in the name of scientific rationality, scientific history. A lot of killings have been done in the name of beauty and perfection of ideologies which are man-made ideologies, and no human artifact can ever be perfect. It is not given to human beings to be that perfect. Previously used to kill in the name of God, but at least God was, you imputed perfection to God, not to your own self. Now human beings act as if they are omnipotent, omniscience and omnipresent, like they are claiming the status of God. And I think in this kind of context, a criticism of knowledge systems is absolutely vital, because dominance is now maintained very subtly through categories, ideas. So when our regime says, our own state says that for the sake of development, we have to be tough with the tribals, and the tribals have been bypassed as backdated, obsolete, retrogressive, easily disposable human beings. And then in desperation, when they turn to Maoists, which try to kill the Maoists by saying that they are all criminals, they believe in violence. But in the first place, the Maoists were very few. It is a tribal revolution we are seeing them. For 60 years we have treated them like infra-human beings. So now they have rebelled, so we are trying to find reasons why they did not ill-treated them and why the rebellion must be suppressed. So actually, without challenging idea systems, you cannot challenge modern violence, you cannot challenge this degradation of large parts of the world, you cannot challenge the domination that is exercised over helpless, weak and poorer sections of the world. That is my thrust. And I think every human being looks for some freedom and dignity. And I hope that in the case of knowledge too, we will ultimately grant this dignity and that freedom to those who practice traditional systems of knowledge.
Thank you, Professor Nandi. We have had a very inspiring and thought-provoking session. So naturally, everybody would hope to have more such sessions with you. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.